To our Managing Through Crisis Summer Series presented by Michigan State University's Broad College of Business. My name is Marcie Stowell. I'm one of the Assistant Directors of Executive Development at MSU, and today we're bringing you insights into how to manage employees working remotely. Dr. Angela Hall will present her research for the first 30 minutes, after which I will share your questions with her. So please use that Q&A feature in Zoom on your device to submit your questions throughout the presentation. I will share as many of those as time allows. After we conclude today, we'll provide you a link to a recording of the webinar, which will be posted on the Broad YouTube channel. All previous webinars are posted there, so you can see any of the webinars we've done in this series, and we'll continue to do that as we go through the rest of the series. And today, a big welcome to those coming to us from Alumni University. We are fellow Spartans as well, fellow alum, and we're grateful you're here and wanted to give you a warm welcome. You will also notice today there are several people in the video panel with us. This is our team. This is the Executive Development Programs team. Each of them has had a role in the summer series and obviously roles in executive development programs. I invited them today for two reasons. One, I wanted to share them with you so you could see who it is you've been communicating either here or in Business and Bagels or in an executive development program. And also we've switched to working remotely as well. So since we all have changed our roles and have different functions, I thought and hope that you team will find some of Angela's work helpful to you as we continue to evolve how we work together remotely. So thank you for being here today. Throughout the summer, you have been generous to us with your feedback, those of you that are watching. We're hearing many requests for more information, more opportunities, more collaboration. We are listening. We have three main responses for you. The first of which we mentioned last week. We have an entire portfolio of programs. Many of our presenters are part of these programs, and this affords you the opportunity to dig deeper into those presenters that you met through this series and that you would like to learn more from. Many of our presenters also work on custom programs that are designed to meet your needs. So that was one of our initiatives last week that we wanted to share with you. The second is what I want to share with you this week. We have set up a collaborative environment for you to engage with each other. I often hear, I need more, or I want to talk to someone else that's in a similar situation. I want to learn from those around me. So we've set up this environment for you to engage with each other. It's a LinkedIn group. The group is moderated, meaning that we have fence posts or rules of engagement, if you will, and we ask for each member to stay within those fence posts so that we hit our purpose, which is to enlighten and inform via intellectually engaging discussion. It's a space for you to have an intellectual conversation with your peers, with peers from other industries, with some of us from MSU. So in the next few days, you'll receive an invitation from us to join this group. If you have questions, if you have ideas, eventually if you want to volunteer to be a moderator for a month or so, reach out to me directly. My contact information is on the website and it's at the end of these videos as well. And so now I want to introduce you to Dr. Angela Hall. She is an associate professor in the School of Human Resources and Labor Relations at MSU. She comes to us via Texas from Florida, where she earned a JD and a PhD from FSU. She has taught a wide variety of courses at undergrad, master's, and doctorate level, including business law, organizational behavior, human resources leadership, employee training and development. She's authored learning modules for SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management. And she works with us as part of several of our programs, including our ever popular Leadership Institute. So Dr. Hall, thank you for sharing your time with us today and welcome.
Thank you so much, Marcie, for that great introduction. I'm very, very happy to be here today. Our agenda. I'm gonna have a 30-minute presentation and about the topic of engaging remote workers. Then we're going to do a 30-minute question and answer period. Please submit your questions throughout the presentation. As you think of them, submit them, and then we're going to choose some of the questions. I anticipate that we may have more than we'll have time to answer, but I will try to get through as many as I can. Also, you can feel free to contact me with a question, and I will ask Marcie to put my email, athall@msu.edu, in our chat function. After the webinar, you'll get the recording, and there's information about technical assistance. So, Marcie alluded to it. There are some other opportunities, such as the Executive Development Program Portfolio, the LinkedIn group for the participation for our participants to collaborate in, and the Business and Bagels monthly webinars. I love Business and Bagels. I have spoken twice at it, and it's a great experience to, to engage with other professionals and to talk about something that's very timely. Okay, so let's talk about why engagement is important. That's one of the first things we're going to talk about. Then I'm going to talk about changing your engagement toolkit for remote employees. The way you engage remote employees is a little bit different than how you would engage employees who are working face-to-face with you in an office or other setting. Something that folks don't often talk about is the notion of being an acute versus a chronic crisis and how that affects the remote worker. And then finally, as promised, we will have time for questions. And then I'm going to ask if we have time to get your thoughts on how you engage remote workers, what your ideas are. So I can't say this enough. Engagement matters. Engaged employees, they produce higher service. They're more likely to go that extra mile to help a customer or a client or a patient. We call that organizational citizenship behavior. They have a tendency to have higher quality and to be more productive. I'm going to go back and talk a little bit later about productivity, because productivity not only denotes the quantity, it also connotes, or it implies that you're going to have good quality associated with that quantity as well. Higher customer satisfaction. Can you think about a time when you just were engaging with an employee of an organization when you just knew they didn't want to be there? The example that I was just giving to someone recently is last year I took my daughter to Japan. My daughter loves, is pretty fluent in Japanese, and she loves Japanese pop music and culture, so I took her there. And in Japan, when we were on the airlines, everyone was so polite and it was so nice. And then when we landed back into the US, everyone was nice, but we met this one person who you could tell that she was not happy with her job. And it made me feel like, wow, if I had to engage with an airline employee like that all the time, I wouldn't want to be on this airlines, So it has higher customer satisfaction. And customer satisfaction is important because why? Because of repeat business. And repeat business is an important concept, even if you are in an organization that is a nonprofit organization. So, for example, I am a Michigan State University employee. And let's say I had more than one child. I just have the one. I have my sweet Sierra, who's a teenager, but just have one. But let's say I had more than one. Let's say that she went to MSU and she had such a bad experience there. And let's say she had a younger sibling. She would talk to that younger sibling, and that younger sibling may be influenced not to come to MSU because of that bad experience. So it affects repeat business in ways that go beyond the realm of for-profit organizations. Also, higher levels of profit. Engaged employees do things that will save their employers money. They will do things that have a cost benefit, that have a cost savings. They will think creatively. They will offer suggestions. They'll stave off problems that may occur. An engaged employee will be more likely to be able to talk down an irate customer, for example. And we know that higher levels of profit will lead to, if you're in a for-profit organization that is publicly traded, higher shareholder returns. But even if you aren't in a publicly traded organization, their returns, like for example, let's say you work for a nonprofit, and for example, the clientele that you service will not, they have a bad feeling, we were not treated well, they won't come back. And that will put the employees' jobs in jeopardy because they might not be able to sustain funding and stuff like that. So know that engagement matters no matter if you're for-profit, nonprofit, public, government. It's very important no matter who you're serving. One thing that is important for me to underscore is that employee engagement is not the same thing as job satisfaction. Now, I could have done a poll here, I didn't, but just give you a second to think about this. Are happy employees the most productive employees? Give yourself a couple of seconds to think about that. Are happy workers productive workers? Well, the answer is not necessarily. So let me do some explanation. I remember when I was in first grade and Sister Mary Eugene used to talk about the kids who were the social butterflies, who went around and wanted to play and talk to the other kids. They were really happy, but they weren't getting any work done. Now let's fast forward 40 something years and think about the happiest employees, the people who love their job and they are oftentimes not necessarily the most productive. So that might sound controversial, but let me explain. You don't want your employees to be unhappy. You don't want to mistreat them. You don't want them to be dissatisfied, but job satisfaction is not the be all end all. You want employees to be engaged. You want them to enjoy their work, but engagement goes beyond that because engaged employees are a little bit more critical. They may say, you know what, this is my advice on how we can improve things. They're not content with the status quo. If you had everyone who was always content with how things were going on and they only felt work was just a social type of experience that had the benefit of you get some money as an outcome, that would not be the best for the organization. And, you know, frankly, it might not be the best for the employee because you need to have that engagement so that you can stay mentally stimulated. So you need to find ways where employees feel in tune with their work. They feel a sense of responsibility for the work. They have a sense of accountability. You want them to be satisfied, but job satisfaction, happiness of the employee is not the end goal. You also want the person who's the devil's advocate as well. Okay, so how do you update your toolbox so that you can engage in remote workers? Well, you know, going around the corner for lunch or the company picnic, it's not going to be an option for many people. I was just talking with the executive education team before we officially started, and I said, you know, once this pandemic is over, we need to have lunch. Well, not even everyone's in Michigan. They're working remotely, and that might be how things are for the foreseeable future. So what are some things that you can do? You can schedule meetings that are face-to-face, and I don't, you know, to the extent you feel comfortable, if you can meet in a way, in a socially distance type of way, that may be an option. But more so, I'm talking about having those one-on-one Zoom meetings or telephone meetings where you engage with your employees, see how they're doing. People are more likely to talk about things on a one-on-one than they would be in a group Zoom meeting. And so those are really important to have, especially face-to-face. I'm doing some research about this now with some folks in the College of Engineering, and we're using Zoom right now, and Zoom is an amazing tool, such as like WebEx and Microsoft Teams. But the downside of any type of remote technology is that we have to realize it's artificial and it's contrived. We as human beings, from the beginning of time when they're being human beings, we communicate face to face, we look at each other's eyes, we use like hand gestures, body language, and a lot of that is, it's different. I'm not looking at you when I'm talking to you at Zoom directly in the eyes, so to speak. So even though we have those limitations, it's better than not having the ability to talk and engage with someone one-on-one. Another thing that's important is concentrate on the what, not the when. Concentrate on the what, not the when. Especially if you are a manager who has a tendency to be very structured, you do a lot of oversight to your employees, realize that it's hard to get things done at home. Like I'm working at home now. I live in a multi-generation house. My elderly parents live with me. My husband is working. He's on a Zoom meeting right now. My daughter is here. I've got all of these rescued pets in my house. And so they're like 15 different life forms in here. It's hard to concentrate. Also, so sometimes it's better that I may get some stuff done at night. So maybe I'm not working that traditional 8 to 5 job. And to the extent that you can allow some flexibility on how people structure their day, that's very, very important. Another thing is to foster a cohesive team. People feel alienated. It's weird being at home. I am not the most extroverted person by any stretch of the imagination. I have friends and I like to go out, but I'm not the person who would like close down the nightclub, so to speak. But even this feels kind of weird to me. And the people that I work in my teams, there's a notion that, if we don't get together regularly via Zoom, that, we're feeling some type of disconnect. We've admitted that to each other. So ways that you can have regular meetings with your team, and the meetings don't have to be long. People don't have, we have something called bounded rationality. And as human beings, we only have a certain amount of attention span, myself included. And so it's a situation where to have that short 20-minute check-in, hi, how everybody's doing, and people reporting about what they're doing or how their life is going, that's very important. Don't forget about employee recognition. It's easy to forget about the things that you were doing, the normal routine before we had this pandemic. Remember to recognize employees publicly during meetings, send them like emails, even heck, how about getting a note? In this day in the mail, in this day and age, isn't it nice to get a piece of mail? Well, I mean, if you're like me, you quarantine your mail for a couple of days, but it's nice to receive a handwritten letter, just saying, hey, you're doing a good job. I know that these are tough times, or that was a great idea. Ways for people to recognize that you recognize them. And that's something that's incredibly important. So another thing is to create accountability. One thing that experts suggest is you can use activity tracking type of software for some employees, especially if it's very important that they, for example, engage in a certain number of clients or customers every day. If you need to make sure that someone's at work, you can have software downloaded to track their activity, make them file certain types of reports, have like check-ins at the beginning of the day, end of the day. Now, that might not be appropriate for every worker, especially when I was in my previous slide, I talked about the what, not the when, but there are certain jobs where that will be appropriate, and for certain workers that would be appropriate. Some people just need that extra level of accountability to stay on task. Do things to create bonding and cohesion, like virtual book clubs, or like where like you all read a book and then you discuss it. That could be done department-wide or unit-wide, or it could be across an entire organization. Another thing is to have TED Talks, like have a speaker go to a webinar, listen to that, and then get together and discuss how you're going to take one thing that you learned at that webinar or that TED Talk and apply it to how you do your work. That's a good way to create cohesion, to have the group connect, to engage your employees, and as a way to keep people mentally engaged. Look at the right. This is called Yerkes-Dodson law. And it's a notion that we need to give employees some level of accountability, engagement, and then it's captured under the term arousal. And it's a way of being stimulated in the sense that, you know, I know that I'm going to be accountable. I know I'm going to have to answer for what I'm doing. I'm mentally engaged. These tasks are challenging, but not impossible, so that I can get my full peak performance. You can't give too much because people become stressed out and their performance decreases. But if you don't have any accountability, if you don't have that kind of engagement, employees' performance will have a tendency to diminish. A lot of people have what's called the COVID blues, and it's easy to just throw up your hands and say, hey, you know, do whatever. But to keep people on task and focus is a real good way to keep them engaged, and it's actually good for their mental health. Speaking of mental health, let's talk about something that's very important that leaders need to do, and that's to practice empathy. We're living in some crazy times. Imagine if you could go back in a time machine and talk to yourself about what happened in 2020. In January 2020, and say, this is going to be a crazy year. We've had issues about social unrest because of social justice issues involving like, movements with like Black Lives Matter. We have this pandemic. We have the economy that is not doing as well. So, for example, in my last slide, we talked about, ways to keep people engaged. One of those things is to have fun, have a happy hour, do online games, do online Jeopardy, virtual birthday parties. Recognize that you have to think about your employees' mental health. Have a virtual pet show. And the executive education team saw this guy earlier. This is one of my 9 pets. I have dogs, chinchillas, a horse, and this is Luca. He is my pet rat. He's the last one of the 3 that I have. I'm sure I'll get more. And so he's a part of my virtual pet show that I'm doing right here. People love their pets. People love to talk about their pets. That's just another way to keep people engaged. Think about ways that you can realize that the isolation is very difficult right now, and that the working from home can be difficult. The notion that I can't just walk across the hall to ask someone a question, the notion that you can't get that pat on the back or the supportive words, just like directly look someone eye to eye. This has been very, very isolating for folks. So that's why practicing empathy is important. Something else that's very important to know is this. We are living in a time of crisis. These are crazy times. Nobody who is alive now remembered working during a pandemic. I guess there's some people who remembered the Spanish flu, who are alive during the Spanish flu, but in 1918, but those people were like babies or toddlers or very young people then. They weren't out working. We've never experienced this before. And in the beginning of the pandemic, we had what we call acute crisis. We're going, holy heck, what's going to happen? Are we all going to die? Are we going to have our jobs? What's going to go on? It came up very quickly. So it's acute. We were just in survival mode. That's the acute phase. Now we're in the chronic phase. COVID-19 is not going away. These social justice issues are, they're become an important part of the national and international dialogue. Those aren't going to go away. So we need to find ways of really engaging with the employees and knowing that the strategies that we adapted in March or April are not the same strategies that we need to adapt now, because this is a long-term type of thing that we're going to go through. And particularly with respect to the pandemic, we don't know when we're going to get a vaccine. Hopefully it's sooner rather than later, but we have to understand this is a chronic type of phase that we're in, and that it's like there's a difference between that one stab versus that death by 1,000 knife cuts. I'm sorry for the graphic analogy, but it's really like that right now. And so we're in this slow phase, which can be very damaging to employees' mental health, and it's very easy for people to drift away. So you need to show understanding for people. And that's not to say you don't have have accountability and make people answerable for what they do, but be flexible, be creative. Know that parents, for example, don't know what they're doing with their kids. I have a 14-year-old. She's pretty self-sufficient at this age. I like to say I live in a house with another woman, but 2 other women, because my mom lives here too. But people are in a situation where they're still type of struggling, and you need to find ways to help them be successful over the long term. So that means planning for the long haul. Okay, and thinking about maybe having a town hall with your employees, having types of, doing some long-term planning on how you can help them stay successful, engaged over the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, till things start to normalize. Also, you need to familiarize yourself with employer and community resources like employer-sponsored EAP programs, employee assistance programs, or community resources like community mental health, childcare types of assistance. Like, for example, some local school districts I know are having some childcare options for people that, even though they're not having school face-to-face, they may be able to avail themselves of some childcare so they can get some work done, or if they have to go to work for periods of time. So familiarize yourself with those community resources will be an additional step to helping your employees stay focused, stay on track, and remain engaged. So at this point, I'm going to open it up to any questions. And I know Marcie is going to field me some questions.
There's a lot of banter about your pet here.
And that's why I brought him up. It was provocative and it kept you engaged. Okay, that's Luca. Luca is a 1.5-year-old dwarf rat. That means that his body does not produce an enzyme, that he's stuck like in a teenage body. Can you imagine being stuck like in your 12-year-old body? That's what happens to him. It's a recessive gene. He's a good man though, very good, like a dog.
So there's a few questions on engagement. You presented on how important engagement is right now and how things are shifting, both our toolkit and our ability to discern when an employee is engaged. So Megan has this question. How do you tell if your employees are truly engaged when you only sync with them for 30 to 60 minutes a week without seeing their mannerisms while they're at their desk? I struggle to truly know and rely on them to speak up if they're having issues.
Ooh, this is really a good one. And it also plays into some programming that I know that you offer with customer service experience. Like for example, ways that you can do what is talk to customers, clients, coworkers. And I'm not saying like you're trying to sneak behind their back to get information. It's a situation where you touch base with them and see how things are going. Are they liking the type of engagement that they're getting from your employee? Another type of thing is to have coworkers meet in certain types of groups and have accountability with each other about like keeping themselves on track and keeping themselves focused. A final thing that you can do is to have more frequent engagement with your employee. You know, like I used to say, especially at my old job, I found it very, I found it as a badge of honor if I could go more than a week or two without seeing my boss. I liked him and I thought he was a great guy, but I felt like if I saw him, it meant that there was something bad had happened, right? We need to kind of rethink that when our boss calls us or we are being called into the principal's office because we did something wrong, having more frequent engagement or contact with employees more than once a week may be a way to make sure that they're staying engaged. That's a really good question.
Yeah, there's several, and it's kind of picking through the different groups that we're trying to engage with. So I'll run through those with you. The next is asking, this is a question from Mary. She's asking, what are some tips in finding the sweet spot? So how do you know with a group versus an individual that you've applied the right level of engagement for them?
That is something that is both art and science. So the analogy that I like to say is like, I am one of multiple children. And think about how you parent multiple children. You don't parent everyone the same. So you're going to have to parent, quote unquote, lead or manage your employees differently based on their needs. You may have a person who doesn't want that engagement, or that, I should say, not the engagement, doesn't want the constant communication, and it may be off-putting to them, but you need to find a way to understand that I'm trying to check in to see how you're doing. I'm trying to make sure that I'm supporting you and you have the resources, but part of the art of it is knowing when to back off, because no one likes to be micromanaged. There's a term called reactance, and reactance is the typical, think of the teenager. They say, no, you can't control me, and they stare them out. Thank goodness I don't have a teenager like that. Maybe it's coming, but I don't have that now. I'm very lucky. But when people are feeling they're overly controlled, they shut down or they rebel. And so you have to be able to find that sweet spot, knowing that person. And one of the things of doing is beginning to know your employees more on a personal level. You know, now that we're working remotely, in some ways for a manager, it's going to be more work for you because you need to know your employees in a way that you didn't know them before. And having those honest one-on-one conversations may be a way of doing that, and soliciting feedback. If all of your employees are like, enough, calling me 3 times a day is like way too much. That's like getting the message, right? You also need to look at things that are more objective, like productivity, quality types reports. Are they staying on track? Things like that. Those are some other things. But also know that during this time of pandemic, some of the productivity standards that you gave before the pandemic, they may not apply for a lot of reasons. Economic, it might just be pure impossibility.
And to continue that dialogue, are there any differences, or do you have any specific advice or ideas when we're staying connected with a coworker versus a manager?
Oh, that's a really good one. I think that people feel that they can show more vulnerability a lot of times with coworkers. Depends on environment. If you're in a heavily competitive environment, no. But if you are hopefully in a more relaxed environment, a coworker is a good person to solicit advice from, saying like, how are you managing these things? What are some advice? Have you attended any webinars? Have you realized any tips and tricks? How is your schedule like? To bounce ideas back and forth with them, and then have the social aspect of it too. We human beings are social beings, even the ones of us who are more introverted, and realize that people like that connection. Like, for example, imagine how you feel just right now. Just think about how you feel when someone you haven't heard it from a while just sends you an email or a text and says, hey, Angela, how are you doing? You just ran across my mind. That makes you feel good. Even that makes you feel engaged. So having those communications with your coworkers, it can be a mutually reinforcing system where you're both giving each other encouragement, advice, and keeping yourself engaged and on track.
And there's a lot of questions about new employees, about onboarding those employees that have started since COVID, specifically those that are working remotely. This is a question from Rita, what are some good pointers for onboarding new individuals remotely so they feel that they're a part of the team? Rita does video chats as a team, but the random learning and team building is no longer present because we're not walking to an office and walking back, having those casual conversations. What are some ideas you have for onboarding remote workers?
So if possible, and if you can do it safely, let me just underscore that, it might be nice even if you can have a remote worker come in face-to-face for even just a couple of days. My brother just started a new job in Minnesota, and he wanted to meet his coworkers. So people came in over the course of a week just to like meet him so they can just see him face to face, and they met socially distanced, and that was something that his employer gave him the option to do. If that is not possible, and I can see how that wouldn't be possible for a lot of circumstances, doing situation where you have just some time with each coworker that is scheduled, and it doesn't have to be long. Have 15, 30 minutes, and do that maybe a couple times a week with each coworker as part of the socialization onboarding process. Having something like that virtual happy hour to get to know people. Assigning that new worker a mentor who is responsible for their onboarding. And when I say responsible, that they're accountable for how that person is socialized, in the sense that they are not going to be quote unquote disciplined if that person fails, but they are accountable for making regular contact with that individual, and that's something that will appear in their performance evaluation, if possible, to say that, these type of extra role or citizenship behaviors that they did, and they get rewarded or recognized for doing those types of engagement. Imagine how many times you've had a new job and you go in the first day and you don't know what's going on, and you're seeing the people walking around. At least you can model other behaviors. When you're onboarding people virtually, you can't even model certain types of behaviors very well. So because you're not there face to face, it might be a situation where you have set up one-on-ones with folks, and they do like screen shares, and you can see like what a morning in the life or like an hour or in the life of my job is, and get those tips and tricks. One of the most important things about onboarding is to know about the socialization, and also knowing about your organizational or your department or unit stories, your history, making sure that people know the backstory so they can get things in context. And that's an important role for mentors, but also other employees to undertake.
Oh, the head of my unit will love that. You just said that. That's one of his go-tos, is given the context and then given the answer. So that's excellent advice. And what about different age groups? This question comes from Vincent asking, are there any differences with your suggestions or communication style given different age groups of employees?
That is a real fantastic question. So this is what we're seeing. People thought that like millennials or Generation Z, the one that comes behind them, would be like, oh, I love this online stuff. This is amazing. They're having as much of a hard time or harder with the types of, with their mental health and being engaged as other people. They feel very isolated. So we're seeing this isolation across age groups. And it may be even harder for people who are younger. Some beginning studies have shown because they're more likely to live by themselves or not live with family members, and so they feel there's a reinforcement of the isolation because they're isolated because they're by themselves 24 hours a day. But we also know that there are people who, and then I'm not trying to live in the realm of stereotypes because there are a lot of older people who are well versed with computer stuff. My go-to person from the computer is a lot older than I am. But you know, you have people who are less comfortable with technology, and it might be because they didn't grow up with it, or they might not. They just never had to use it or experience it. You're throwing people on. They may have a job where they're very face to face. I'm seeing young people who never really had to use a lot of technology before because they were like in sales and things like that. They went to talk to their client face to face, and now they're setting up Zoom. So training, having tutorials, that's important. And also having maybe mentoring, having people sign up and say, hey, you know, I am willing to mentor someone. I've learned more about Zoom from my coworkers than I have from some of the tutorials that are out there. So those are types of ways to keep people engaged. And to answer your question, we're seeing struggling across all different age groups. And one thing though we all have in common is that we're all going through this experience together. And that's a great starting point to be able to bring people together because we have a collective goal of making through 2020 and beyond.
That does unify.
Yes.
I have two more questions on this topic, and then we'll move into the toolbox. There's a lot of good questions coming in, so we just have two more for this topic. The next one is asking about those employees that are not interested in engagement right now, when they have specifically said they just want to do their job and not participate in extra team building or engagement activities. How do you recommend this be addressed?
That's a good question. I think that the importance of these things should be underscored. That part of being a good teammate is to provide support to your team, that it can be a learning experience for you. I always say this, every time I go teach my master's students or my PhD students, I learn something from them every class. They tell me something. So when you're living in a bubble or a box by yourself, you don't have the opportunity to learn new things. So that's important. Now, can you coerce someone to go to virtual happy hour? No, but you can tell an employee that they're required to go to like my senior year, religion teacher at my Catholic high school, Father Demos, used to call it Rap and Relate sessions. Every Friday we had Rap and Relate. He thought he was really cool. And so we would just have an open topic and we would learn amazing things. And people were like, you know, just to bring up random topics. You being a part and a contributing member of a unit is engaging. And I know it's difficult for people to engage, especially when you're not feeling well. You have the COVID-itis or the COVID blues, but I think that's something that should be underscored. That being said, you have to realize that people do have anxiety, depression, they may have social anxiety, and you know, they may need to be accommodated. So that's, I put on my lawyer hat for a second, but most people that I've heard make this complaint, it is not because they have a psychopathology that prevents them from fully engaging. It's that it's just not their preferred method. So it really needs to be underscored, and also it should be incentivized in some way. We need to reinforce the behaviors that we want to see and not reinforce the behaviors that we don't want to see.
What's the key difference between engagement during crisis and engagement during normal times?
Great question. During normal times, you can have a playbook that you can go by. Now we have to be more fluid. We need to show more grace, as someone had said, and be more forgiving. We need to think more creatively in how we are going to approach processes. And the things that we noticed that, the pandemic is horrible. Millions of people have been affected, and all these people have lost their lives, they've lost their employment. However, it's a situation where the upside of it is that it can allow us to start thinking about doing things differently, to do things better, to think in a way that, why do we always do this process? I'll give you like an academic related example. I used to come in and physically sign all the acceptance letters that we used to give to the program. And even during the pandemic, I would mask up, suit up, put on my face shield, my gloves, my mask, go in and sign them. And I'm thinking, why do I need to do that? I could do an electronic signature and do a phone call. That's personal too. The recipient can tell that it's an electronic signature and I didn't put pen to paper, but it's an opportunity for us to realize that we can think of things, do things that we had never thought possible because we were not spurred to do it. One thing about the human spirit is that we are very tenacious. We've been around for many, many, many years on this planet, and we have the ability to adapt to change. And so we have to take this as an opportunity to realize that we can think of some creative ways to keep people engaged, knowing that they also are going through some pretty difficult times.
Let's shift into talking about the toolbox. And, I work for a business college. So the first thoughts I always have are, what's the investment and how do I measure that it's effective? So the same question to you from Trent is, how do you quantify the engagement impacts in terms of sales, profitability, shareholder returns? Do you have some metrics that you recommend for that quantification?
That is a really good type of question. So part of that is that you want to look at benchmarking across your industry and to see how that's going for professional associations, if you have relationships with competitors or not even competitors, organizations that operate maybe within your same arena versus, maybe geographically. But you also have to take consideration that we are in the middle of an economic downturn in certain types of industry. So your data or your goals for 2020, the third quarter of 2020 may be very different from your goals from the third quarter of 2019. What is important for you is to get data. And this can come in the sense of getting customer data to figure out, what the market is like. But it could also be a notion of just talking to your customers, talking to your clients, thinking about is reasonable, and also talking to your employees who are forward facing, who may engage, for example, in customers. And those customers can be internal or external, and figure out what is appropriate. There is no magic wand or like single set of criteria for you able to find that kind of information. It'll be both art and science, but it needs to be data driven, but it also needs to be common sense driven as well, because we are in such a fluid state right now. It's like nailing Jello to a wall. But that being said, you can make comparisons between employees in different groups or within the same group, comparison type of data, but activity type of tracking, but know that you're going to need both quantitative and qualitative data. I always say it's always good to talk to the competitors, look at benchmarking, professional associations. Those are the first ways to go.
And the next step is talking about a policy. So one viewer, Mary Beth, shared that her employees have worked at home since March. Now a few are being called back to work, and they're viewing that with resentment as being a punishment, although it's very important that they be on site. So I'm blending this with another question from Keith, who says he's working on a remote, or I'm sorry, he's working on a work from home policy. What are key elements of a policy that the employee will be able to read and get comfort or point to as a positive?
Ooh, that's a really good one. So what are some key things? I think that any type of policy should have a statement in there that we know that working from home presents challenges, right? And that the employer is going to be it is going to try to consider the needs of the employee as they make these policies. That being said, when you're talking about, I'm going to go back to your first question about having to go in when you haven't previously been, it's scary. I mean, many of us know someone who's gotten the COVID-19 or who have died from it, and that's a very scary type of thing. To ensure employees that you're following types of protocols, as far as, you know, enforcing social distancing, making sure that you're having the types of disinfecting type of equipment that you may need or supplies, making sure that, you know, clients or so that they may come in contact with know the standards that, you know, you have to engage in these types of things. And make it very clear to the employee that you're trying to protect them, and underscore that. And, you know, practice what you preach. I had some students who weren't very happy because they needed to come in on campus to do something. So I suited up and went to campus myself. And so it's one thing for me to say, oh, you need to go in. It's a second thing for me to like go in myself and say, hey, I understand that there are risks. And, you know, I have like health issues that may even complicate it more, but I am going to show you that I'm going to model the type of behavior. I'm going to practice what I preach, and I'm going to lead by example, to let you know that this is a situation that we can manage this, and to do it in a way that's safe for a lot of people. I am practicing very strict social distancing as personally I can, but I saw an interesting report. They showed a woman who was a hairstylist, and she wore a mask, and everyone wore a mask around her. And she was in contact with 130 something people, but because they practiced strict protocols, the health department reported that no one got infected. This was not in Michigan, this was another state. So the health department expert was saying that just shows you the power of when you do things right. And so if when employees know that protocols are going to be followed, they're going to be enforced, and actually they're going to discipline people who don't do the protocol. Oh, I have a mask right here. None of this, you know, like the nose underneath that's popping out from your mask, that's not wearing a mask, right? So having rules and having consequences for wearing the rules, for not following the rules.
Okay. This question could apply in times of acute or chronic crisis, in times of normality, or in times of change that we're in right now. This is a clever question. This person, Deb, mentions that they have a leadership team meeting every Wednesday. Their WebEx, you know, their video conferencing meetings go on for 3 hours. Their team has 12 people on it. They use the chat and they try to control how long each person speaks. However, it's getting old. So do you have any ideas or recommendations on how to make these meetings shorter and more exciting?
Ooh, that's a good idea. So one thing, maybe two things. Maybe think about shortening the meeting. You know, when I was in law school, we talked about someone who's the helium hand, the person whose hand always seemed to come up like it was had a helium balloon on it. Of course, you're limiting how long people can speak, but breaking it up, like do an icebreaker, a topic that may be germane to the to your department. Like, what is like the most difficult thing that you had to do this week? And I'll give each one person 1 minute. And then halfway during the discussion, you can have something else, virtual pet show, or you can do like a little poll, or you can do like a quiz, or like, okay, let's do online Jeopardy for like 2 minutes. Let's do like our own a little quiz show type of thing. Break it up. It's fun. Maybe put people into teams and then reconvene. Like I mentioned before, people have bounded rationality, and the fact of just sitting there not being engaged will make it be torturous for some people, and they'll zone out and they'll multitask. And, you know, so finding ways to get people stimulated. The other thing is that you can have different people lead the meetings different weeks, or you can have like a question where you can say, hey, this is something that we're going to have you research, and you're going to have to give like a 2-minute report. Or you may say, like, have people stop and like put them in breakout groups, or not even put them into breakout groups, and then have them come up with some ideas, and then ask everybody to engage and say something, to mix it up, to have the variability. Variability is a way to maintain engagement and interest, and also putting that level of accountability would make it good as well.
Excellent. Those are all very great tips. I'm glad we're recording this so I can go back and review what you shared. You gave so many so quickly, so thank you. The last question we have is on communication, and then we're going to switch because I know you have a question for those that are watching. So here's the last question I have for you, and then we'll switch to your question for the viewers. As we practice empathy with our team members, we may be managing each employee uniquely more than ever before. As we manage each employee uniquely, we also need to take care to communicate equity as well as foster empathy in other team members. So would you please describe how to manage internal communications that balance that sensitivity to personal circumstances with being open with all the team members?
I love that. And I think about the divide between, for example, people who have kids versus people who don't have kids. And there's been a lot of dialogue, even prior to the pandemic, that, you know, there are all these family friendly policies that people with children can take advantage of, that we are not, that people who don't have children, or they don't have children that they're taking care of, they're grown or whatever. So you need to make your policies status neutral. Okay, so like, if you have flexibility on time, like what times, like your core hours that you have to be in front of your computer, and the person needs to have accommodation because they have like some childcare needs, like they have to set up their kids in front of the computer, you need to offer that to everyone. So you have a floor and a ceiling, and you can keep everyone in there, and people can get that level of accommodation that they need or want within that floor and that ceiling, and they can take advantage of it. But to say that, oh, you know, the people with who have older parents to take care of, you don't have to come to these meetings, or you have like children who are, you know, who have to get off and have them ready in front of the computer. You can start like an hour later, and you don't give that to everybody else. That can open up some aspects of possible discrimination suits, but not even beyond that. Just imagine of the equity. If when you're feeling inequitably, it's going to affect your behavior. We have something called equity theory. People who feel they're treating inequitably, they have a tendency to withdraw. So you don't want to do that. So make these status neutral type of policies and apply them, but encourage people who need them to be able to avail themselves of those.
Okay, thank you. And I know you have a question for the viewers. So if you're watching, I've opened up chat. You can send a message to the panelists here. Yeah. And in response to her question, I'll share some of your ideas with Dr. Hall.
Great. Yeah, I'd like to hear your ideas for keeping remote employees engaged. When I speak, whether it's like executive education, a webinar, in front of my students, I always learn something from my audience. So I'd like to hear what your thoughts are.
I know I've been a part of with you, the virtual pet show and tell,
Yes.
which is a good thing for someone like me. I tend to want to jump right into business, and then I miss that connection of walking with you to a meeting,
Yes.
and getting to hear about your pet. So, that's a really good way for me to gauge, am I being too far in the business column and not enough in the relationship column? So that's something we've done. There's a few coming in now. Marina said that they've started a department-wide book club on Friday mornings. They discuss hot topics in the industry. Jessica has endorsed breaks, encouraging at least 15 minutes break every 4 hours or one free vacation day per month.
Great.
Sharon has coffee time once a week. They talk about anything and everything. She says it's really helped bring their team together. Susan is in particular asking a lot of questions about your pet, but she also said she had people send her a baby picture. She created a PowerPoint quiz so people could guess who the person in the photo was.
Oh, that's fun.
The walking club, a weekly Teams call, virtual birthday lunches. David mentions he always tries to ask how a coworker is doing before he jumps into business talk. I'm gonna have to save that tip from David, thank you. He also tries to remember what's going on in an individual's life and to ask about those items. So several great ideas. Thank you for sharing them, those of you that are watching. There's
Thank you.
so many good questions. One of them is, do you have a face-to-face class? You and I are working on a virtual class together this fall on a leadership topic.
Yes.
Probably not face-to-face just yet. We're following the MSU guidelines for that. So we have hit 2 o'clock. So
yes.
Dr. Paul, thank you so much. You have just packed full your time with suggestions and thoughts for us to consider as we work on managing remotely in crisis and then after when the crisis eventually dissipates. So thank you. And to everyone watching today, thank you for coming. We will hopefully see you next week. Take care.
Bye.